Hello, everyone. This is Eva Nolik-Smith with YogaUOnline, and I'm very pleased to be here today with yoga therapist Lynn Crimando, who is a lead mentor in our Yoga Wellness Educator program. In addition to being a yoga therapist, Lynn is also a board-certified health and wellness coach, a certified personal trainer, and a Buteyko practitioner. Lynn has more than, is it 4,000 hours, Lynn?
Pretty much. I can't help it. I try to stop and I can't.
And it's not just some boring academic PhD. It's all about yoga, yoga therapy, personal training, healthy aging. So you're really the kind of expert we want to talk to when we want to know more about some of the things we can do to extend not just our lifespan, but what is known as our health span. That is the number of years we are able to enjoy life and live life to the fullest, not just staying alive. So welcome, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So remember that old riddle about the Sphinx? What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? I always thought that, it's so striking that, the issue that we've had, that we're struggling with today has been with mankind since forever. When we're babies, we crawl on 4 legs. When we're adult, we walk on 2 legs. But when we get older, we have to get that cane. We have to get that support because we lose balance, we lose strength, we lose mobility. And I think this particular time is very exciting because there's so much new knowledge out from science about not just how that process unfolds, but what we can do to counteract it. Yes. We can't live forever, but we certainly can do a lot to slow the process whereby we lose mobility, whereby we end up on those 3 legs. Since you're really studying this whole area so much, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this particular time and the new knowledge that has come out about how we can extend our health span.
I think what I'd like to do is tell you how I started down this wormhole, if that is okay. And that was as a fairly new teacher. I got a job in an assisted living facility, working 3 days a week, 2 classes a day with the regular population and 2 classes a day with the regular population and 3 classes a week with the locked memory support unit.
Teaching yoga.
Teaching yoga. And the thing is that when I came in, the first thing I saw when I came in was a lady teaching about balance, and she was showing how to get out of a chair, and she was showing people how to rock back and forth and then use momentum to push themselves using the handles of the chair. And I was pretty horrified, and I was only at that point, 1,000 hours into my training, but what she was doing had no correlation to anything that I was working on in terms of anatomy and kinesiology. So my first class came in, and it took a really long time to set up the class because they all came in on walkers. And one of the things in the subsequent, 15 years is that what we know is that when people go into assisted living, they're encouraged to stop being independent. They're encouraged to use walkers because the staff doesn't want to deal with falls, right? And so I said to the people on the first day, and I didn't know a fraction of what I know now on this particular topic. I said, we're losing those walkers. So you're going to work with me. We're going to lose those walkers. There's no reason. You guys are letting those walkers walk you, number one. You're walking in here like this. We're not having it. And I said, and if you think this is going to be like a baby class where I'm talking baby talk to you and I'm using my yoga voice, we're doing itsy bitsy spider, not happening. So I left that facility a couple years later, and the day that I left, there were about 3 walkers. And one of my best students, one of my favorite students, was this beautiful woman. She would never miss a class. She would come early. She would sit in the front, and she called me to say goodbye after I left. And she said, Lynn, guess how old I am? And the gold standard of guess how old I am in assisted living is you are somewhere north of 94 years old. And my standard answer was always, everyone here looks 70 to me. But I said to her, I don't know, how old are you? And she said, don't ever tell anyone this, but I'm 99. So a 99-year-old came in with a walker and didn't need a walker after a little while, because what did we do? We worked on our prime movers. And that to me just said, there is no age at which you cannot improve someone's health. And this dialogue that's going on right now about aging is so interesting, because that is what they're figuring out, that there is no age at which it's too late to do something to improve your condition. And that's what is exciting to me. And I think that's what the research you're talking about is largely showing, is that what we thought is not what it is. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, one of the most interesting areas of research is really surrounding the factors that cause us to lose strength and mobility, and the way we can counteract those. So we hear a lot about osteoporosis, the loss of bone mass that puts us at risk for fractures. But there is another process that's even more universal than loss of bone mass, and which affects us even more. And that, of course, is loss of muscle mass, which is also known as sarcopenia. And that's such an important area of knowledge, but very few people have actually heard about sarcopenia.
Well, that is an evolving story. That is like my latest wormhole. So sarcopenia is a wasting away. It's a decrease in skeletal muscle, right? And what you see is a healthy person, and they call it, these are the people where they say they're skinny fat, that the circumference of the wrist hasn't changed, but the ratio of muscle to fat has changed. The circumference, for example, of the area around the shin hasn't changed. But then if you do a dissection, you see that it's, the muscle has really deteriorated, and the space has been filled up with fat cells. But that, to me, isn't the most important thing. So sarcopenia, for a long time, was thought to be a contributing factor to a lot of age-related loss of muscle tone, of muscle strength, of ability to move. And, you know, they do these tests on grip strength of your dominant hand, on your ability to walk fast, on your ability to stand up, which is what I was working on with those people. I had no idea I was doing research, but I was. And your ability, how fast you can walk. And those are some key indicators of healthy aging, of healthy muscle tone. So the story about sarcopenia is really interesting because it's an evolving story. So for a long time, people thought that loss of muscle mass was the reason they were falling. The same way they used to think that the loss of bone density was the reason people fell and broke their hips. And then they said, no, they're falling and they're breaking their hips because they have osteoporosis. But a person with osteoporosis who doesn't fall doesn't break their hips. So they're disassociating those things, right? They're disassociating and they're saying osteoporosis is a risk, but the bigger risk is falls, because falls are deadly for people as they age, right? So here's the thing about sarcopenia. Starting at about 2008, they started to do studies where they realized they could not prove a correlation between loss of muscle mass exclusively and loss of muscle strength.
Interesting.
So they coined a new term, dynapenia. Now you can have, this is the other thing about sarcopenia. Sarcopenia has been thought to be an age-related issue for people. I have somewhere on my messy desk here, I have some stats. Between the ages of 50 and 79, the average loss of strength is 30%. And after 79, there's a 3 to 5% loss per decade. But in those years, oftentimes muscle mass is constant. It's not continuing to be lost. So they said, well, something else must be going on here. It's not so much the quantity of muscle fiber, it's the quality, the tensile strength, and there's more. And that's where the dynapenia came in, because what they discovered was that elite athletes who retained their muscle mass still lost strength. So that just in the way, this is an evolving story, and every study I read says something different. But every study is finding that sarcopenia and dynapenia could both be present, but you could have either one of those without the other one. You could lose muscle mass and strength, but there are a lot of people, and I know this from all the people that I teach, who look like their spindly legs couldn't take them anywhere. And we do sit to stand in our yoga classes, and they're doing it, and they're coming up and down. Their legs are working, their muscles are working. So there's another piece, and that has to do with what it takes to get a tendon to move a muscle. And it's more than how much fiber there is. There's another really fascinating piece, and that is, what is your reaction time? What is the signal that the brain is sending the muscle? You know, what are the neuromuscular instructions, and how does cognition fit in? So there's a table that everybody looks at. I've actually seen you show it at some of your presentations, but it's that markers of functional aging. Do you know what I'm talking about? The 6 realms. So I call it the 6 realms of physical function: cognitive, neuromuscular, musculoskeletal, mobility, walking, running, gait, cardiorespiratory, balance. And to go into what is creating movement, 3 of those cognitive things have to be present. So part of the picture is loss of muscle mass and sarcopenia. And part of the picture is loss of the cognitive acuity to send muscles to the muscle, signals to the muscles. And part of it is muscle strength. And one or all of those things could be at play, which I find extremely fascinating when you're talking about, does aging have to be a straight downward spiral?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And it's particularly interesting in light of the recommendations for strength training, because coming back to osteoporosis,
yes,
you know, people get recommended to do strength training, and they go to strength training, and it's this kind of repetitive motion. And time out for a second here. Can you hear the downstairs? Tara just put the TV on. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let me yell at him. Hey, Tata. Tata? I'm in the middle of an interview with Lynn. Thank you.
Is this okay so far?
Yeah, it's great. It's
Okay,
great.
good.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just, let me just think.
You were talking about the kind of training, the kind of strength.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I think what's interesting from that perspective when it comes to resistance training and the repetitive motion, particularly for a yoga practitioner, repetitive motion is like the kiss of death. You just don't want to do it. And it sounds like what you're saying is that might not actually be the best way to train.
Yeah, that is actually not
train the brain.
No, exactly. That's
body integration.
I mean, okay, we are both here in some ways because we love yoga, and there's a reason for that. So I want to talk about one other thing that you said, and it has to do with all of the research. So there's a dynamic process going on where people are talking about, is sarcopenia this? Is dynopenia that? Is osteoporosis this? Is frailty that? You know, there are all these terms. And if you start down this path, and I'm not recommending it to anyone who wants to have a life, don't start down this path. But if you start down this path, there's very little agreement on anything except one thing. So for a long time, they thought the thing about sarcopenia is we have to build up muscle mass. People aren't metabolizing their food properly. They're not getting their protein. There's a lactase problem. Should we give them amino acids? Should we give them supplements? You know, that's the same thing with osteoporosis. There is one thing about which there is zero disagreement among all of those people, and that is strength training can mitigate, can reverse, can stave off muscle wasting, if that's the problem, muscle loss, if that's the problem, osteoporosis, if that's, whatever you want to call it. Every one of these studies comes back with strength with some resistance. So resistance-based training as the only thing that there's, from what I've seen, no controversy about. However, if you want to talk about doing these, I'm going to ask you, when you get off of the gym floor and you've done a bunch of these, where is this getting you? It's not helping you stand up.
Right, right.
So I have a thing, I don't think I can say it off the top of my head, but it's 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 5 indicators of wellness. There's 6 realms of physical function, and there's 7 essential moves in the body. Let me see if I can think of what they are off the top of my head. Pushing, pulling, hinging, back extension, twisting, walking, and there's one more. Let's see, push, pull, hinge, extend, push-ups, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Those are the functional movements. If you can't do those 7 things, you cannot walk out the door, drive to the grocery store, get something off the high shelf. Oh, twisting. Get something off the low shelf, push your cart, pick up your groceries, and walk back into your house. If you don't have those 7 things, if you lose any of those 7 movements, you've lost the ability to take care of yourself.
Right, right.
So where's this going? Which one of those is this helping?
Right, right.
Right?
Yeah.
The other thing is
similar with all the other mirror muscles that tend to be the focus of a lot of
okay, the one everyone focuses on, can I get 6-pack abs?
Right.
Here's my answer, who cares?
Yeah.
That's a secondary core muscle. That's even a tertiary core muscle. Can you bend down, pick up a 5-gallon jug and not rinse your back? That's the question. And it doesn't, 6-pack abs aren't going to go there. So the kind of training we do Oh, here's one other thing that's really fascinating. And it's fascinating on the dynapenia front. Men start out with more mass and they lose it at a higher percentage. But women, because they start out at less mass, lose more muscle strength. And guess where they lose it from? Not from here, from their lower body.
Mm-hmm.
From the lower body.
Legs, yeah.
Yeah, from the prime movers.
Yeah.
Glutes, quads, hamstrings, from the muscles of locomotion and stability. That's where they lose it from.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
any focus on what the cut muscle looks like, to me, it's it's what I call spending time in space.
Right.
It's not going to help you pick up your grandchild when you get to that point in your life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So where yoga comes in too is that yoga has what I call the secret weapon, which is the engine of breath. Mm-hmm. Because there is a ton of data on how you can stabilize the core, the deep core, using just your breath. And they've done tests with, not even with exercise, with one of those things like that, where people got more core strength, just breathing into those, whatever those machines are called that they give you for practicing.
Yeah.
So the role of the diaphragm is really important.
Right. Yeah, speaking of yoga, I think there's this general misunderstanding that yoga is for flexibility.
Yes.
But I think if we really look at it, yoga is probably, if you know how to do it right, yoga is training flexibility, it's training strength, and it's training neuromuscular integration, which is that key thing for avoiding dynapenia.
Yes.
But we don't really have, some poses are obviously weight bearing. You think about warrior two, or, all the different warrior poses, but there's so much more that can be done to integrate strength training in yoga. Is that correct?
It's so correct. I wish I could show you my Instagram, because I started doing my own private answer to all those Instagram yogi shots of crazy, stupid, interesting poses on the top of a mesa of a 20-year-old, who could do a thing. And so I decided I was going to create something on Instagram called Hot Chicks Doing Yoga. And I would get like my 82-year-old in a 3-legged plank and say, on her 84th birthday, Evelyn is going to take both of her feet off the floor. But I have, most of my students are over 70, lots of students over 80. And in some classes, they're doing work in a chair, and we're doing like stuff, and they're sitting there I'm doing everything online right now. Everything I can see that they're next to their bed in a wheelchair, and they're doing, this is their practice. This is their squat practice. But I also have people that I'm taking through squats and lunges and things. But if you think of those and they sound like fitness, they're not. A squat is Utkatasana, that's fierce pose. A lunge is a lunge. A back extension is Shalabhasana. If we apply breath to that, the thing that I think is that makes it different is my classes are all strength-based classes, but you don't see super fancy poses. You don't see super complicated poses, because what I want to do is stabilize the core, create integrity between the upper and the lower body, so that you can turn on a dime, you can step off the curb or step back. Those are indicators of functional movement.
Catch yourself when you trip.
Catch yourself when you trip, or have a better fall.
Right.
And that is a different kind of practice. That is a much more, in some ways, cerebral practice, because you're doing less and it's much harder.
Right.
It's much harder than jumping through a chaturanga to a this, to a that, and you're using momentum and you're using compensation patterns. If you come into a quadruped position and do core breath, you will find that it feels like you've worked really hard.
Right.
And you've done barely any movement.
Yeah. Excellent. And we're very excited and grateful because you are doing a course for YogaUOnline on yoga for strength training. So tell us about the course and what you'll be covering.
In the first part, I'm going to talk about my 5, 6, 7, 8, because I think if you understand things in simple terms, and where I got that from is, in choreography, before you start a dance, you go 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you're off. Well, this is my 5, 6, 7, 8 to healthy aging, and strong, flexible, strong, mobile, functional muscles. And that to me is why I do yoga, and it is why I teach yoga. To me, it's just never been about, can I put my foot back there and take my picture on the beach? It's always been about, what is this bringing to my life, right?
Yeah.
So what we're going to talk about is how all of those things from the strength training world already exist in yoga, and that yoga has something else, which is the breath, the application, the intelligent application of breath to these poses. And I've broken it down because just as there are 7 key movements, there are 8 key poses. There are 8 key movements. If you surveyed 100 trainers, fitness trainers, kinesiologists, if you surveyed 100 of them, they would say the 8 key movements are squat, lunge, hinge, twist, push-up, core. What are the other 3? I'm forgetting the other 3, but don't worry, I'll have them in the class.
You said them earlier.
Yeah, those were the movements, but there's poses to work those muscles.
Right.
We're going to go through that, and we're going to go through the poses. So I'm going to show people how to integrate strength into any practice. You don't have to change your practice.
Strength with
neuromuscular strength comes with it, because you're going 2 legs, 1 leg, this position to gravity, that position to gravity. You're changing your position to gravity. It's simple work, but it's not easy.
Right. And that's what's so unique to yoga, that you're not just mindlessly doing X, Y, Z. You're really using your brain to connect with your body in a completely new way.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And even when you don't know that's what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I have a sequence that if you come to the class, you'll get the sequence. You're going from 2 feet to a lunge. That's a different balance. To a warrior, that's a different balance. To a high head, to a tree. And I'm not saying change your cognitive function. Right. You're going to change your cognitive function, your relation to gravity, or you're falling.
Right.
So that's the other thing about yoga, is if you stay with your practice and you're not watching CNN while you're doing your yoga practice, you're in your body, you're in your breath. That's a different process.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today, and we very much look forward to your course. I'm familiar with your work from all the wonderful things you're doing for YogaUOnline, so I know it's going to be a fantastic course. So
as you can tell, I can just barely get any enthusiasm up about this topic. I do think, and I've heard you say this before, I do think that strength training in yoga is the true fountain of youth. Because you're doing all those realms, they're all there. The realms of functional aging, they're all there.
It's a beautiful point.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. And
thank you.
See you soon. And everyone, thanks for listening, and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.